I have already shown you how to paint clean white armor without using an airbrush, so today we will tackle the other two colors that beginners often struggle with the most, black and yellow. But before I show you how to paint them, let's first look at why they are so challenging in the first place. When it comes to black, it is very easy to push your highlights too far and accidentally cross the line into something that reads as gray instead. Yellow, on the other hand, is notoriously difficult to paint with a brush because of how transparent it is. Painting it directly over black is almost impossible, while working over a light undercoat requires quite a bit of patience. Applying too many layers can leave visible brush marks, and if you don't allow each coat to dry properly, half-dry paint can peel back off the model, leaving an uneven finish. Before we get started, today's video also contains a giveaway, so make sure to stick around for that. Starting with the yellow, these are the colors I'll be using. The brown simply acts as a stepping stone, allowing me to build the pinks over the black primer. After a couple of thin coats, I'll begin with the first pink, using the same sponge technique I showed on the white tutorial. If you'd like a more in-depth explanation of how it works, I will leave that video linked below. For now, after wetting the sponge and squishing out the excess water until it's only damp, I will work some slightly diluted paint into it before gently stamping it over the armor. Because of that stamping motion, the paint naturally catches the raised surfaces, while leaving the brown visible only in the recesses, creating our shadows automatically. For the hard-to-reach areas that I don't necessarily want to leave this dark, I simply cut the sponge into a much smaller piece and held it with a pair of tweezers. From there, I moved on to the lighter pink and repeated the exact same process, however only covering a smaller area than before. Like I mentioned in the previous sponging video, the pose of the miniature can make this technique easier or harder to use. On this model, however, the head was the only sub-assembly I had to work on separately. Once I was happy with the gradients, I picked out a few of the sharpest edges with pure white, and also cleaned up any surrounding areas where the sponge had accidentally left a few marks. Only then did I move on to the yellow itself. Instead of regular acrylic paint, I'll be using a yellow ink instead. It behaves almost like a speed paint, but in my opinion, they are much better suited for this particular job. Their pigmentation is incredibly strong, giving us a vibrant yellow after only a single coat, while still remaining transparent enough for the underpainting to influence the final color. The whites become bright yellow, while the pinks naturally shift toward orange, creating shadows without having to push paint around or needing it to settle into the recesses in any shape or form. Once everything dried, the ink I was using left behind a fairly glossy finish, but I didn't worry too much about that. A varnish at the end of the paint job will bring everything back to the same finish. One thing I do recommend though is leaving more pink visible than you might initially think. Those orange shadows are what really sell the yellow, and help define the volumes that were so easy to create using the sponge for the underpainting. Before moving on to the black armor, Starforged has been kind enough to provide some items for a giveaway. If you would like to participate, simply leave a comment below telling me which technique or model I should cover next in this Armageddon series. If you are looking for high-quality hobby accessories and other Warhammer-inspired collectibles, definitely check out their website. And if you'd like to pick out something for yourself, you can also use my discount code for 8% off. You will find both the code and their link down in the description. To paint the black armor, I'll once again make use of the sponge, although only for the very first layer. Its job here is simply to establish the main volumes and quickly cover the larger surfaces without risking accidental stains on the yellow armor. From that point on, I'll switch back to a regular brush for the highlights. Just like I avoided using yellow until the very end, I am also avoiding pure black for now. Instead, I am beginning with a dark blue-gray. The reason is simple: nothing is darker than black, and if I started with pure black right away, I would have nowhere left to go to place my deepest shadows. But by beginning with a slightly lighter color, I leave myself enough room to reinforce the recesses with black later on. I am also intentionally leaning towards blue-gray rather than neutral gray. Adding a bit of color helps prevent the final result from looking dull, while suggesting that the armor is reflecting some of the surrounding environment. When it came to highlights, I stopped using the sponge because black needs very small highlights. A common mistake is giving every highlight roughly the same amount of space or importance. When that happens, the miniature stops reading as black and starts looking grey instead because the black loses the protagonism. Small highlights create much more contrast and help preserve the illusion of black armor. Now, at this stage my model looks far more grey than black, but that's completely intentional. Just like we used inks to transform the white underpainting into yellow, we will now use them as filters to shift this grey armor back towards black. This is the part I really want you to understand. The goal isn't to paint the armor black again, it is to tint everything we have already painted. Because the ink is transparent, every layer slightly darkens the highlights, midtones and shadows at the same time. The transitions we have already created stay exactly where they are. They simply move together towards black. Think of it as placing a tinted sheet of glass over the entire paint job. Nothing underneath disappears, everything simply becomes darker. For that reason, this isn't applied as a wash. You do not want the ink collecting in the recesses. Instead, apply a smooth, even coat across the whole surface, making sure it doesn't pull anywhere. 2 or 3 thin layers are usually enough to shift the darkest grey towards black. By then, all those smooth transitions and crisp highlights are still there, but they are now dark enough to match the black shadows and make the overall armor read as black. The only obstacle here is patience. As you can see, I still made a couple of small mistakes here and there, where I didn't notice tiny pools of ink drying on the surface. They are not particularly noticeable, but they are exactly the kind of thing you want to keep an eye on if you are aiming for a really smooth finish. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, make sure to let me know what you'd like to see next to enter the giveaway. And also check out the Starforged store for yourself. You'll find their link and my discount code in the description. As always, thank you very much for watching and I'll see you in the next one.